Blessings. Welcome to another episode of the Professor and the Priestess. I'm Aust NeferKa, and we have Mama Regina here with us, Dr. Regina Jennings. First and foremost, Mama Regina, do I have permission to speak?
Absolutely.
Give thanks. So I'm so excited for episode 2 of our series. So season 1 of The Professor and the Priestess is all about how revolution is the only solution. And in our introductory episode, if you haven't watched that, then you can click the link and you can watch. I'll put it in the description, the previous episode. So we'll end up putting a playlist on the YouTube so you can watch all of the different episodes that we stream. If you're here with us live, welcome. If you're catching the playback, welcome too. You can comment below and we'll get back to you. But if you are live, please feel free to engage with us in the chat. We would love to answer any questions or comment on any of your comments that you put in the chat. So please feel free to engage with us. That's the whole point of being here live with us. So welcome. And we did do introductions already previously, but Dr. Regina Jennings, as I call Mama Regina Jennings, because I think Mama is the highest title to call you. But Mama Regina Jennings is also a PhD in Black Studies, and she is an original Black Panther. She is a mother and a brilliant elder. We're so thankful to be aligned in this life. So I don't know if you want to express anything else in a brief introduction for those who are here for the first time, who maybe didn't get to see your full introduction that you gave in the first episode.
Sure. I definitely want to add that I am a writer and I have 6 books so far. I also have 35 academic peer-reviewed articles in academic journals. My books, though, are for Black people. If you are not, or if you don't identify as Black, even though the whole planet really is Black, because Black people were the first people on the planet, so everybody else came out of the Black womb. But those who absolutely identify as Black, African American, I wrote these books for you. My latest book is called Blacks in Race Defense, Killers and Cutthroats. And what I did in that book, and you can see it on my website, which is running below this video. What I did in that book was to gather together some of our heroes that we may or may not know about who have been in the war with the racist enemies from early centuries right up to contemporary times, and they've won. We often, as a people, hear about so-called leaders and heroes of the past who are gone, and their memories are sometimes forgotten. So I gathered together people who are heroic to the Black experience and to me. And in poetry, I wrote about each person, and there's pictures in that book as well. So I love all of my books. I'm not going to give a description of them all, but I just wanted to talk about the latest one because it's like giving birth to a new baby. I'm very, very close to that latest book. In fact, let me show it to you. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Blacks in Race Defense, Killers and Cutthroats.
Ashe. So yes, you can click the link. We'll put the link in the description, but also the website for Mama Regina is on the bottom of the screen. It's a Panther Sister. .com, and you can find her books there and any other information about Mama Regina on her website. And then I'm Aust NeferKa. Those who are here for the first time, who may not know, who haven't been on the platform, I'm the mother of Tehuti Ma'at. I'm a healing artist. I am a farmer. I am a spiritual warrior, revolutionary. And yeah, I'm just so thankful to be, present and active in this dialogue, because what I love about being able to have these conversations, especially live. So if you are here live with us, one, can you let us know that you can hear us loud and clear in the chat, please? You can let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to just engage with you if you're here with us live. Now, for those who don't know about Tehuti Ma'at, definitely watch the first episode, but we are a revolutionary instrument. We're focusing on developing cooperative institutions that are revolutionary, specifically in the areas of healing, art, and education. So ultimately, we are all spiritual warriors. We're different educators, activists, artists of all sorts coming together to create cooperatives. We're really building on the legacy of the Black Panther Party and all of the other freedom fighters who came before us in the Black liberation movement, and just continuing that, because our goal is to, in our lifetime, successfully complete the revolution that we are continuing within, right? So we spoke a lot in the first episode about how Tehuti Ma'at is building on the legacy of the Black Panther Party. One of the things we touched on was the 10-point platform and how that has informed and revolved into the 11-pillar platform of Tehuti Ma'at. So as we go through each of our episodes, we're going to be going through each of the pillars. So pillar 1 for our platform, which I want to say first and foremost, our platform is building on the foundation of all the great ones who came before us. But specifically, we build on the foundation of spiritual warriorship, which is an intrinsic, it's really a healed leadership paradigm. And one of my beautiful sisters, Kepra Ma'at Heteru, is the creator, alongside some other youth in New Bedford, of the Spiritual Warrior Society, and created the Self-Initiation Mission, which is really about bringing forward our goal and our process, like a real deep process of self-initiation for us to move into healing as leaders, right? Because in other paradigms that we've been in terms of revolution, healing has not been on the forefront. And with Tehuti Ma'at, healing is the foundation. Healing is actually in our definition of revolution. So we build on the 5 forces of spiritual warriorship, which are love, light, leadership, power, and freedom, because it is universal. But Tehuti Ma'at is focused on revolution. So our 5 forces are healing, liberation, restoration, elevation, and expansion. Okay, so everything is about really rooting us into a more holistic and African-centered perspective and ideology. So I just want to give thanks to you, Mama Regina, for your presence and the wisdom that you always bring forward. I do also want to shout out our brother Jabril. What up, Jabril? Jabril, Africa
Jabril,
Queen.
fantastic.
So happy to see y'all beautiful faces again. Great to see you. Glad you're here, brother. So our conversation today is on the first pillar of Tehuti Ma'at, which is Ma'at. Ma'at is actually a pillar. So I'm actually wondering, Mama Regina, if can you give us your perspective on what Ma'at is?
Well, I've always thought about my art since I learned about it. As, of course, it's a symbol of justice. And because Black people have never received justice in this racist hellhole of America, okay, because our origination in this country was one in bondage. So we have yet to receive the justice that we absolutely deserve. But I do want to speak on this, good sister Neff, because this is August, and this fits into a sense of justice, the
Um,
origins of Black August.
Mama
You,
Regina, can
yes.
you? I did not hear what you said. Do you mind repeating yourself, please?
Oh, okay.
It might be my
Yeah.
connection, but I didn't hear what you said.
Okay. I said that I have learned about Ma'at, and it is the ancient Kemetic symbol of justice. And as a people, and I'm a part of a Black people who have never received justice because our entry into the Americas was in chains, we were in bondage. So we have yet to receive a kind or any kind of justice in America. And I wanted to also include the idea and image. Can you hear me now, Neff?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Good. The idea and image of Ma'at, from a definitely from a Black perspective, and included within the time period in which we are both situated. This is August, and our people, especially revolutionaries in the prison system in the 1970s, they developed what's called Black August, you see, and I wanted to make that clear to our listeners because this is I don't even want to call it a holiday, but it is a time period that was based upon some of the most heroic episodes in our history. And they evolved around a very famous prisoner named George Jackson. George Jackson, back in 1961, was accused of stealing $70 from a gas station. And, he's a teenager. I don't know if he did it or not. He said he didn't, but he was arrested. This is 1961. He was sentenced to 1 year to life. And I really want our listeners to think on 1 year to life. That is obscene and crazy. And it also means that San Quentin prison had control of his entire life if they chose to, because he had 1 year to life. Now, when he went to prison, what he did was a Malcolm X. He educated himself, and he was also educated by other brothers, particularly W.L. Nolan. They became absolute friends, and George became a revolutionary. He read Mao Zedong, he read Lenin, he read white philosophers, and when Malcolm X came out with his book, he read Malcolm. Now, as he becomes this educated warrior, of course, like all good teachers, like what Neff is doing, like what I've been doing for over 30 years, he wanted to teach others what he knew. So within the prison system, he spread his knowledge, and that alarmed the guards and the warden. And so he was singled out, and he was thrown into solitary confinement for his activism behind bars. Now, what he did, though, while he was incarcerated, he wrote these letters to his little younger brother, Jonathan. So Jonathan grew up being raised by his brother who was incarcerated. Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson's baby brother, by the time he turned 17, his brother had been in jail for darn near 11 years, okay? And Jonathan knew that his brother was not going to be let out of jail because he was also charged while he was in prison with the killing of a prison guard or the beating up of some prison guards. Because with George, if the prison guards beat him, he beat them back. And that's what he also taught other brothers to do. So he was a danger to the prison system. So what Jonathan Jackson, George's little brother, did, 17 years old, when he was 16, he brought George Jackson's case to the attention of Huey P. Newton and Bobby G. Seale, the founders of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. He also brought George Jackson's case, his big brother, to Angela Davis, you see. So all became involved. Angela was not an actual Panther, but she was always around Panthers. So in any event, Jonathan decided that the only way to get his brother out of jail was to develop an escape for his brother. Now, in the meantime, George Jackson was drafted into the Black Panther Party as a field marshal. So we knew all about George, his life and his legacy was written in the Black Panther Party newspaper, which we read every week before we went out to sell them to our people. So we knew about George. I was in love with George. George was fabulous. If you don't know George Jackson, please look up his pictures. They're on YouTube. He was absolutely stomped down, handsome, gorgeous, and courageous, as was his little brother.
Yeah. And there's the
So
book,
what?
Blood in My Eye, right?
Yeah, that's the second book. The book that I want people to start with is Soledad Brother, The Letters of George Jackson. Those are the letters that he used to raise his little brother. Then read, like Neff said, Blood in My Eye, because that's a killer diller too. But I want you to see how he raised Jonathan Jackson, his little brother. Jonathan Jackson got some semi-automatic weapons. It might have been, it's either August 1st or August 7th. I'm not exactly sure, but it was August, I can say that. He armed himself. He went to the Marin County Courthouse. And there were three other brothers on trial at that time: William Christmas, Fleta Drumgo, and Ruchell McGee. Ruchell McGee just got out of jail after doing 60 years, but that's another story. Anyway, young Ruchell McGee was in the court. Fleta Drumgo and William Christmas, they were on trial for, I believe, injuring a prison guard. Jonathan walks in with all of these weapons, throws one or two to the brothers who were on trial, turned to the judge and said, "Gentlemen, I'm taking over right now." So he took the judge hostage. He took the prosecutor hostage. He took a couple of the jurors hostage. And of course, the brothers that were on trial, Fleta and William and Ruchell, hey, they went with Jonathan. Oh, you dig? And so Jonathan's plan was to exchange the officials for George Jackson. But the police, when they all went out to a van to escape, the police, they went on a chase, and the police surrounded the van and just shot in. The police didn't care that they were killing a judge. They didn't care that they were killing and wounding jurors and a prosecutor. All right? A man who was that daring, they had to kill him. And I'm calling him a man because he was a man, but he was 17 years old, okay? Or 18 years old. So here we go. So Jonathan was killed, all right? And George, still in prison. You can imagine how he mourned his baby brother's death, okay? A year later, W.L. Nolan, who had been one of George Jackson's teachers, was shot by some prison guards, and they let him die. And they didn't even take him to a medical facility where he could have been healed. Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson, then got into an altercation with other prison guards, and they killed George. So the first week of August, Jonathan Jackson was killed in 1970. In 1971, I think it still was either the first or second week of August, George Jackson was killed. So he was so loved by revolutionaries on the outside and those within the prison walls, they decided to honor the legacy of these two brave brothers, these Jackson brothers. They would fast, they studied, they exercised for at least a couple of weeks, if not a month. And when people on the outside found out about what these prisons across California, maybe even the East Coast too, because Attica, the riot at Attica started not long after this, you see. They decided to let August become a special, I don't want to use the word holiday, a special resurrection of some of our greatest revolutionaries fighting for our freedom. Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson. Then we find out through history that it was in August that Nat Turner had his rebellion, okay? We also find out in August that the Haitian Revolution kicked off. So August is quite a month. And so I can't remember her name, and I'm so sorry, I just don't remember. It was a good sister in California that actually started putting together activities and events for Black August, and it spread from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I'm going to end with this because I'm shocked every time I think about it. When I decided that I was going to be a member of the Black Panther Party decades ago, I decided to leave Philadelphia in August. I knew Black August didn't even exist, but I really believe this, Neff, that the energy of our ancestors, all right, urged me not to leave in June, not to leave in July, but to leave in August. So I feel a personal kinship with this month and this time period that I believe plays right into the legacy, if you will, of Ma'at, okay, about cycles of time and justice that I know you can talk more about better than I can.
Yes, I'm so thankful for everything that you just shared, because I think that that legacy is very important. So, rise in power to both of the Jackson brothers, and honestly to all of our beloved, honorable ancestors, all of the warrior spirits who fought to even get us to the position where we're in right now. Um, and you know, as you mentioned, cycles of time, right? We've been moving through so many different cycles of time, so it's always important for us. I love to put into context in the way that our beloved ancestor Baba John Hendrik Clark would say, in the scope of the beginning of the millennia that Africans have existed on this planet, it's one half the wink of an eye, the amount of time that we've been in this beautiful struggle. So I think that it's very important for us to recognize that we weren't always here and we won't always be here, but we're here right now, right? So we have to be present within the struggle. And there's no coincidence at all why it's Black August. Like, I think the energy that you're speaking on is really significant, because even though our episode today is about the balance of the sexes, which is really what Ma'at is all about, and the reason why we're focusing the lens in terms of the sexes is because we're dealing with the energy polarities, and what Ma'at represents is truth, as you said, which is wholeness. So you have to look at the full spectrum, and within our universe, as zoomed out as you may want to go, some people may not even know this, but there's literally a universal force that extends beyond our galaxy, beyond our super cluster of multiple, many hundreds and thousands of galaxies. Beyond that, clusters of super clusters of galaxies that have billions of solar systems within them literally have the same polarity expressed. It's what's called the great attractor and the great repeller. It's literally the magnetism of the universe, right? And the way that we are being programmed, and one of the main tactics that's being used right now in the warfare is this battle of the sexes that they keep projecting out into the collective consciousness in order to keep us divided in the most fundamental way, because we know the primary institution is the family. So if you're going to keep away men and women, if you're going to keep men and women apart and at war with one another, then that's all you really need to do. So it's a very, evilly intelligent tactic that's being used. So, but the subtitle that we also gave was how ancient cosmology is necessary to root us in truth. So what you're saying about Black August, what I know that many people may not be familiar with is our ancient cosmology, right? So we're talking about holistic science, not just astrology. We're talking about astronomy, the actual movement, the actual science of our universe, our planets, our solar system, which are just energy spheres, and how they influence us, but connecting that to the mathematics, the geology, all of that. Today is a very significant day. It is August 8th. 8-8. When we talk about the language of the universe, which is mathematics, you're talking about a synchronicity right there that opens a certain portal, right? And it's just a movement of energy. I don't want to get all mystic with it, but there is an episode that I just streamed live last night, specifically on the Lionsgate portal. And that's this energy that we move through every August. And it's significant for us as African people because obviously we know that the lion is such a significant symbol as an indigenous animal, representing pride, representing strength, representing courage. And it being an African animal is just beautiful within itself, because it shows that collective African spirit. And why we have Black August is because the Lionsgate portal represents the rising of a very significant star, binary star system, which I think is very important as well, because we're talking about balance and the balance of the sexes. When we talk about a binary star system, that means there's two. We have a lot of sociology being injected into the collective right now as well, in a very propagandized fashion about non-binary. So it's interesting that this star system that's rising, that begins rising at the end of July and moves through the month of August, but is emphasized today specifically because this numerological alignment and synchronicity on August 8th. There's a reason why our collective spirit is always roaring. There's a reason why it's the hottest month of the year, right? It's the energy is amplified because Sirius, or Septet, or Sabu Septa, because I think it's very important for us to use ancient vibrations. Sirius, Septet, this binary star system, it's literally our spiritual sun. It's the sun of our sun. And in our ancient cosmology, in Kemet, we referred to Septet as our origins because we saw ourselves as cosmic beings. Yes, we're the original people of the planet, but we said our legacy stems beyond this planet. We're galactic, we're cosmic. So that's very important because we also have a lot of propaganda right now around aliens, extraterrestrials. People are, programming a lot of people with this new age, which people have to really recognize. Our warfare is not strictly political. It's not strictly economic. It's not strictly mental. It's spiritual. So that psychological attack is also a spiritual attack. So it's very important to take into consideration when they start talking about Anunnaki and aliens and start talking about things that we can't root, that we can't actually ground in a practical way, where it's like you have to rely on people channeling information and it gets all, extra out there. We have to be very careful with that because it's another form, it's modern forms, new age forms of still creating this foreign entity, this foreign deity outside of us for us to give our power to. So someone else is going to come and save us. And I'm going to tell you right now, we are the ones that we've been waiting for. We are the ancestors that have returned. So we have to do the work to continue the struggle and move us out of survival and into a state of life, of regeneration, of restoration, so that we can thrive and return to our golden age, because that is the natural progression and cycle that exists throughout all of nature. And we touched on this in the first episode as well, like going from evolution, a linear idea, Eurocentric way of thinking, to revolution, a cyclical, cosmic way of thinking, which is what our ancestors and our ancestral consciousness is all about. So we're talking about not just returning back to that, but I love this quote that Mama Joy always uses, Dr. Joy Hardiman, from some ancient texts, some sacred texts, where Hatshepsut is quoted in terms of returning to restore that which is in ruin and make it more beautiful than it was before. So we're not talking about just going back to what our ancestors had and recreating that. We're talking about making it better. We're talking about revolving it, expanding, going beyond that, right? Because the spiral expands. And even though as we're revolving around our sun, Ra, we think it's a circle, but it's really a spiral, because we have to remember that everything in our universe is spiraling simultaneously. So it's not stagnant, it's not in the same spot. So the sun is also spiraling. So we're never returning back to that same spot, even when we come back around in the revolution. So the same thing is happening within our movements. There's certain patterns, there's certain things that happen that reoccur, recycle, but they're never in the same spot. So it's important not to get stuck thinking like, oh, history repeats itself. Nothing repeats itself in that way. If you get stuck, if you stagnate, you're actually dying, right? So when we talk about that balance, it's about death and decay and life and regeneration. And we see that within the polarities of masculine and feminine as well. So that's something that I actually wanted to engage you on, Mama Regina, because I know I've been telling you about some of the conversations and some of the things that are happening in the public sphere. But what do you see in terms of this need for the balance of the sexes and us looking at the fundamental institution of family in terms of revolution and restoring Ma'at, or serujing Ma'at, as our ancestors would say?
Well, first off, I want to say this, especially for our listening audience. We are in Black August, and Black August, again, is involved with brothers in particular, some sisters, but brothers mostly, incarcerated. So, what I implore many of you to do is to go to the Jericho Movement website, pick a political prisoner that you want to write to. Now, Imam Jalil Amin always comes to my mind because when I knew him, he was H. Rap Brown, and he wrote the book Die, Nigga, Die. But Brother Love, last time I saw him, it was at Huey's funeral, and he's an imam now. And he made quite a change in his life. He's even written a book. Oh, I'm blanking on the title, but in any event, it's about the Muslim warrior. When you are a straight up, straightforward, speak your mind, behave as a revolutionary, this system will track you. And this is what they did to Jalil Amin. So he's back in jail, and he should not be in jail. So he is a political prisoner. So, I encourage people, write to your brothers, your people behind bars, especially during this particular energy that Neff just beautifully explained, from the Ancient of Days to today, because we are at war. The United States actually says it has no political prisoners. That is an absolute lie. And the United States has more prisoners than any other country on the globe. All right. So, what does that have to do then with the so called battle of the sexes that we're going through right now? And notice that word. Black people didn't come up with that word. Battle. Battle. No brother is my enemy. Now I know we have some sick brothers that, they confused. They're wearing their trauma, all over them. I'm not talking about them. No brother or sister is my enemy. I am not in a battle with any brother or sister, because they are not my enemies. As Malcolm has said, some enemy went over to Africa and brought us here. Okay? And it certainly wasn't, well, some were involved, but it certainly wasn't in general, overall, our brothers, our African brothers and sisters. So what's going on now? And it's very interesting, Neff, when I think about this, because it's like, wow, before I incarnated in this body that's Regina, I wonder if I actually asked to be an elder during this time period. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't know. If I'm able to go and come back, I'll let y'all know. But this is the point. Family used to mean much more to Black people than it means now. Why is that? That was by design. The enemies that brought us here, the same enemies that killed as many Native Americans as possible, the people that actually welcomed them here, showed them when to plant, how to plant, what to plant. Okay? They're gone. We're here. All right? So divisions is embedded within the sick white psyche of those who actually control this country. Notice that we're at war right now with Ukraine or for Ukraine. They want to kill as many Russians as possible. All right. Before that, it was Afghanistan. Before that, it was Desert Storm. Before that, it was Iraq. Maybe I'm getting my wars chronologically out of order, but you get my drift. And when I was a kid, it was Vietnam. These are, listen, Malcolm X called them bloodthirsty. He was correct. They love war. Okay? I'll get back to that in a moment, but I want to talk about this. If you have strong Black families, see, that bothers demonic people who wants to keep the Black family separated just like they legally did during slavery. So it was very easy to separate the Black family. A sister had a baby, that baby could be given to somebody else, all right? A Black man, marries a woman, well, he could be sold to another plantation. So the Black family, from its origination in the Americas, was separated by law, okay, and by the deviant moral code that the controllers of America have. Now, all right, okay, that form of slavery, for the most part, is over. So then, how can you continue to keep the Black family, to keep the Black woman and the Black man separated? Why, you could emasculate the Black man. You could make sure that he doesn't know about a George Jackson. He doesn't know about a Jonathan Jackson. He really doesn't know that Nat Turner had children that were sold away from him. You didn't know that Nat Turner had children and a wife named Cherry. See, so you don't tell the true history to the people that you want to keep divided. Then in 1974, Henry Kissinger put together, it was classified until recently, a report. I think it's called the National Security Statement Memorandum. It's online. Look it up. 74. They wanted to depopulate the planet. It was official. Now, they didn't say it. I'm going to say it, very plainly. They wanted to stop Black people worldwide from having children. Why? Because whites aren't producing children at the rate that Black people do. So they put together a memorandum. Look it up. It was once classified. It is not now. They wanted to depopulate the planet. And let us take a guess, Neff. I wonder what continent they really wanted to depopulate the most, or what people did they want to depopulate? Well, I'm sure you all know the answer. It was Black people. Now, how in the world do you depopulate a population? You push homosexuality, you push feminism into, I don't need no man. Yeah, you do. Oh, yeah, you do. Okay. So you make sure that the educational system does not teach about like the people that I write about. Okay. Or the stories of ancient Kemet and the star pattern history that Neff talked about. You don't teach that kind of thing. All right. You have movies made where Black people look silly, foolish, and just motherfucker, fuck.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because when I think about, like, when you started talking about population control, I'm constantly, like, the way my mind works, I'm constantly thinking when I'm communicating and putting things out, okay, what are the What are the countercurrents? It's also part of just my nature, like as a seer as well, because it's like you kind of you sense the stream because you're in eternity of all the thoughts that come from what's expressed. And I
Yes,
immediately thought about how people are being desensitized to actual conspiracies because of this overload and being bombarded with these fallacious and ridiculous conspiracy theories. And it's not to dismiss outright, because usually there's a hint of truth. But again, we'll come back into that with Ma'at, because Ma'at is not a piece of the truth. We're talking about the whole
that is
truth
the
and
truth.
nothing but
That's
the
right.
truth, or it's not the truth. If it's a piece of the truth, it's not the truth. So, but it's interesting because I immediately thought about like the movie, because the black exploitation movies are still coming out, and people are more embracing them because we don't have that political consciousness anymore. We
That's
don't have
right.
that political
And that
consciousness
too, that
to
too was by
see that the
design.
entertainment is weaponry. We
Yes, it is.
can't engage with the media in the way that we are. I always remember how Kwame Ture would always talk about the capitalist media press. And I loved how he put it in that context, because it's like, don't get it twisted. Don't get
That's
it
right.
twisted. You got to know your enemy, but you
That's
also got to
right.
know yourself, because what you're talking about is knowledge of self, which means you have to know your story. You need to know your legacy, which
That's
means that
right.
all that ancient, that's cosmology, that's sacred science, but also the knowledge of self is your history or your story, our story, the people who came before us, our warrior spirits. What legacy are we continuing? And knowledge of self is knowing yourself, knowing your own blueprint, knowing your own star system. Because the reality is, when we were born, there's a star print for that. A lot of people outright dismiss astrology, and they don't take into consideration the natal chart and the fact that literally when you were born, all of the energy spheres were in a certain position. You
Yeah.
knowing that is part of your own self mastery, your knowledge of self, and knowing how you operate emotionally, where you thrive, where you need to strengthen, where you meet resistance in your life, how you relate to others, what are your optimal ways of connecting. All of these
And
things
that's
are written
now,
in the
I
stars.
want you to also, because you're talking about astrology, and I don't want any of our listeners to think we're talking about the Greeks' astrology
No.
that is written in many of the books that are, selling today, So
Yes, I'm
expound
glad
on
you
that.
said.
Just
Because if you're watching and you're not subscribed, I invite you to subscribe, and I want you to check out some of the other episodes on the channel, because we have a live stream series we do every other Wednesday called Navigating Eternity. It's building on our holistic energy management system, which is really about looking at how we align with natural cycles of time. But we talk about the origins, the ancient origins, the African origins of the Greek and Roman interpretations that we have for the planets and our solar system. And so I'm not just talking about astrology in terms of how it applies and connects to us. I'm talking about the actual astronomy, because even the names of the planets that we use, Venus, Mars, those are Roman
that's right.
names, and that's taken from our ancient story. So it's insulting to our ancestors to use their enemies, honestly, like to because when we look at the situation that we're in right now, it's the continuation of that legacy. So even when you mention homosexuality, in a sense, it's like a symbiotic expression for the European, because when we look at ancient Rome, homosexuality was the culture. It was a normal part of the culture. So on top of that, they get to go back and return to a normal expression of for themselves, for their nature, and also simultaneously create a dynamic where, obviously, if you have two people of the same gender, of the same sex coming together, they cannot reproduce. So you create confusion, right? But confusion gives purpose. And that's one thing we have to remember, because Ma'at is cosmic order, right? So when we see our solar system and how all the planets are in a certain order, there's a reason for that, for each of those energies being aligned in that way. There's a structure to each thing. So The only way that that's purposeful is because there's chaos. If you don't have chaos, then there's no need for order. So that's another aspect that I think is important for us to take into consideration. Like, we have to recognize, oh, thank you for giving me purpose. Thank you for being in opposition. We have to make our enemy serve us, to strengthen us. We can't be afraid. That's what I feel with this lion heart energy, with this energy of Black August. It's about courage, having the courage to embrace the warfare, to embrace the war, to get militant, because that's really what we're missing. And that militancy applies across the board. You know, I like to take the higher ground, because when everything starts in spirit and then it takes form. So if we battle on the highest ground, and the ground that I mean, it's just, we already won there, because you already know we connected. So if we just tune into our strengths,
yes,
then yeah, we already won. But you spoke on a number of things. But before I even respond, because I think thinking about our brothers and sisters that are political prisoners that are locked up, I want to speak on that. But I did want to acknowledge this comment and welcome Brother Rashawn. I like this quote I heard from Greg Carr. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Goes in line with what you said.
He got that from a white writer. I'm blanking on the name, but cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then I just put this quote up from Brother Jabril: confusion of the highest order. Yeah, of the highest possible order. I'm a quote Lauryn Hill. Of the highest possible order, distorting our tape recorders from hearing like underwater.
Oh, wow. Go ahead, girl.
Well, you know what? I actually do want to share. I want to share a piece, because it's really going to speak to the core, because now we get into the heart of the issue, right? Because we're talking about the cultural and spiritual attack and how it's taken form with depopulation, right? So I had spoken, I don't want people to be desensitized to the true conspiracy, because we're talking about conspiracies that are not theories. At this point, there's a record. We know what has happened. I mean, and some people do not know. That's one thing. Because like you said, they're keeping people ignorant of our legacy and what has transpired, right? So a lot of people don't know that in their court systems, their halls of injustice, they literally implicated that the FBI was involved in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. That they still
the FBI was involved in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. They killed their own. So you know what they would do for us.
Absolutely. But the fact that they would do it to the person that they still giving us on a silver platter, sanitized and nonviolent, is very, that goes to show you who you're dealing with. And I'm so thankful for Dr. King's type of struggle, because a lot of people disrespect Dr. King because he wasn't, it's easy to get behind Malcolm, because we like, yo, I ain't turning the other cheek. I ain't turning the other cheek.
Let me tell you too about King. King at least did something. Black people were not doing anything.
But he did a lot. And that's the thing. I don't want to minimize what he did, because he allowed us to see the brutality. He allowed us to see the savagery of who we're dealing with, so we could stop all the extra, apologetic, turn the other cheek. But again, it goes back to the spiritual warfare, because if most of us are spiritually enslaved and we're still continuing the religious indoctrination that they gave us, then obviously you're still going to be pacified, because your spirit is enslaved. So when we talk about even going even deeper, right, that's why our culture and returning to our roots is very important. But I want to share a piece that really gets us into what the message is really within Ma'at. And this piece is called Ancestors Speak. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speak, and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Crystal clear, crystal clear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speaking and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Have no fear. Have no fear. Yeah, yeah. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? It's right in here. Right in here. Knowledge, but you still don't know because you blow wherever the wind blow. They say my soul's so indigo, but this shit glow every single shade of the rainbow. Wait, pause, no homo, no, and this ain't no homophobe flow. Best believe I bring my art though, bet. Really can't get electricity with 2 plugs and no outlet. Bet. That's what you get when you fuck around with set. Bet. Can't nation build without a saw and os. Bet. Welcome to disorder. No control when you ain't got no borders. Best put your walls up. We in a war, yo. This shit's a war zone. Chasing dough, status quo clones. Putting out nights in a cell, getting back blown, forced to give another nigga dome. Damn, and this time you grown, not a boy getting raped in your own home. Same cycle you've always known. Telling yourself it's a choice because your manhood's grown. Strange fruit, same song. Voluntarily castrated. Sexual confusion, sedated. Voluntarily sterilized. Believe in Planned Parenthood lies. No tears in your eyes when your own baby dies. Don't you see? I was there too. I see my reflection in you. Didn't know what else to do. You don't know when you don't know the truth. I said, you don't know what you don't know. Play girl in the hood, program like a pro. No remote control when you got no control. But now I know, now I hear, now I see. Now at night I can't sleep. The spirits of would-be children speak to me. They want to be free. They just want a chance to be who they supposed to be. It's bigger than you. It's way bigger than me. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speaking and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Crystal clear, crystal clear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Have no fear, have no fear, yeah, yeah. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? It's right in here, right in here. Ashe. Okay, so that's Ancestor Speaks. The Ancestors Speak. And I wanted to land that because it's very important for us to recognize this is way bigger than we're putting it into context. I know this is a difficult conversation for a lot of us to have. I know a lot of us don't even have the courage to have this conversation because we've been pigeonholed into not having the conversation. There's people getting canceled for having certain conversations. You can't even have an opinion. I think yesterday, Neo said something about transgender children changing their genders, and they just went off on him. So it's very important that we speak the truth, period. But we have to have our own African center. We have to stand in our center, right? Doesn't mean we don't see things in other perspectives, because the African perspective is both and. It's not either or. So when we stand in Ma'at, we're holding it all. We're holding that Yorugu, that Iceman inheritance, because we recognize that we are the mothers and fathers of humanity. But we have to stand in our center from our vantage point and see things very clearly. So when we say truth and we say we're talking about Ma'at, we're talking about balance. We're talking about reciprocity, giving and receiving in equal measure. So there is no turn the other cheek. That ain't balanced. You reap what you sow. And that's the nature of the entire universe, right? That's how everything remains in order. So we're in a situation right now where we're in a decline, but things have to come back around. So It's inevitable because that's how everything always comes back into balance. So our time is coming. It is actually upon us. The tipping point is here now. So we have to have the courage to make it a reality. Because yes, in eternity, we already won. I always say we already won and we're already won. That unity that we have to have. So when we look at balancing the sexes, we have to look at what's going on with Black men and look what's going on with Black women. Look what's going on with African men. Look what's going on with African women, right? The African family across the globe. Because I think it is important for us to root ourselves on that geographical location, knowing that we've populated every single part of the planet. So there's no debate. We ain't African, because that's a whole nother thing they got us going. There's so much confusion around even our identity. So that's why I'm like, no, let's go back to the origins. If we say we're cosmic, you want to call us Black, we're Kemetic, carbon, that carbon compound, what people are calling melanin. Because when you said earlier about population control, the nature of the universe, the balance to Ma'at is Tehuti. Every single energy and force in the universe, when we look at our sacred science, always has its divine counterpart, its complementary energy. You have the masculine and the feminine always. So Ma'at is the feminine and Tehuti is the masculine. Where Ma'at is cosmic order, Tehuti is universal law. Tehuti is the scribe. Tehuti is intellect, wisdom. So everything must be written. So regardless of who the person is in the human family, it must be written, it must be declared. So they always say, they always document, right? The government, when we look at how things get done, these treaties and all that, they still have to write it down. They've created a whole language around it, the legalese. And Malcolm already told us we're dealing with the language of liars already. So we're dealing with a colonized tongue already. On top of that, they've created another secondary language for the legality in order to put things into writing and completely contradict what is spoken. It's a very sophisticated system. But the reason why I bring that up is because when they talk about when you talk about population control, they declare it all the time. They're telling us we have to reduce the carbon footprint. That's why I say knowledge of self is so important, because if we know that we're carbon and we know that carbon is life, the essential element of life, then we already know what they're telling us. That's why they're declaring war all over the place and there's death and decay. And even when you said the thing about, I thought immediately about, you said about how many brothers and sisters are in prison. And I remember Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, he had done the Oxford Union debate. And he said in there, that was one of the things that really stuck out to me, there are more Africans colonized in America in prison than there are Africans in Djibouti and Equatorial Guinea. That's a lot of warriors. It's a lot of soldiers. Go ahead, Mama Regina. I think you're on mute.
Absolutely correct, and understand that the prison population, they do labor, free labor. So it really is a form of slavery. This is what Huey Newton talked about when he was in prison, and so did Bobby Seale to the other prisoners, and certainly George Jackson as well. And I want to say this too, because we're talking about truth here, and we're talking about male and female energy and bringing it to a balance. Every sister that's listening to me right now, I want you to think about the fact that most of the political prisoners who get mail is often from white females. Now, I'm not hating on white females at all. Not at all. I'm not hating on white people at all. I'm really not. But I do want you to know that these brothers that have been and are in jail, they were in jail for you, my sister. Now, I know you have a lot to do. I know that you do. Many of you have children. Many of you are working just to keep your little apartment or house or whatever. But I implore you, especially during this month, just start doing this month, to really think about these brothers that have been in lockdown, all right? Political prisoners that stood up against a tyrannic system which we live under, and they're languishing. They're languishing in jail. And you see, I mean, one of my Panther brothers, Herman Wallace, I hate that I can't remember this child's name. This little white girl, little Italian girl, she brought him so much joy. I mean, she was an artist, and she would write out his vision. Like he had a vision. He said, when I get out of jail, I'm gonna have me a swimming pool in the shape of a panther. Yeah, and I'm like, and she would draw it and send it to him. You know how much joy that gave that brother? Okay. When he got out of jail, he'd been out of jail maybe 2 days. Me and Bobby Seale, and other Panthers, we talked to him, and then he died. He died. Okay. Now, what did I'm calling her little, well, she was kind of short. What did the woman, I hate to just call it a white woman, but anyway, what did the white woman do then? She gathered together all of the letters that her and Herman Wallace had written back and forth to each other, and she constructed his cell because he wasn't solitary, see, because he was a Panther behind bars. So they separate Panthers behind bars. You dig? They separate them from the general population because they don't want the general population educated. So she constructed a facsimile of his cell. All right. And it was just terrifying to see the small space in which this man spent so many years. And she took that cell and she did exhibits across the country. She did one at New York Public Library, and it was wonderful. I applaud her. At least he had someone who cared about him. And we're not even talking about sexually. See, because in this culture, what these people have done is make sex a god. I mean, you got to have sex. You just, let me have that. Your dress got to be up to your coochie, and then you can make $1 million. You got to be called a stallion because you want men to ride you front, back, any kind of way. That's what America is. Even white scholars are talking about this because they see that America has become like an empire, and empires always fall, always. And the way that they fall, one of the tenets of how they fall is the sexual heightenedness of everything. Okay, you can't see one movie, well, maybe you can see one or two, but most of the movies, right, today geared to young people, because I looked at a couple with some youngins over the weekend. I was stunned. I was effing stunned. This woman says, well, do you want to fuck me in the front or do you want me to fuck me in the ass? Now, who says that? Who says that? What woman I mean, I know there are some that do say that, but it is not many. What I'm getting at is this. None of us stop. No.
You gonna get me going.
What I'm getting at is just this is a business. Okay, it is on purpose that they are pushing this narrative, because if you are so hung up on sex, well, hell, then you can't really help the revolution like you need to. You can't really help Black children to reach their greatest heights, okay? Because your mind is someplace else, you see? And that's why, look, dope, fentanyl, hey, you see them in every city. You can come to Philly, and I mean, they got a whole area where young men and women are just, they just there. How are they getting the drugs? They're not making the drugs. They're not making the drugs. So there is a war to keep the Black man from the Black woman. And I am saying to all of those within the sound of my voice, nations begin with Black families. You have to have an intact Black family and families to start a nation. And in the 60s and 70s, we used to say, hey, nation time. That was because we knew that that would be a foundation for us to have the co-ops, have the farmland, have the spiritual healing, have all these fabulous things that Sister Neff is talking about. It starts with the family. And this is why our major enemies are at war with the Black family.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I'm like, I don't
You
even know
know,
where
I shock
where to
myself
start.
sometime when I talk. Go ahead, Neff.
No, no, I love it. I love it. I wanted to acknowledge a couple of comments though. So, resistance breeds strength, absolutely. And I want to shout out our sister, Danny Ghazi, and she said Neo apologized already. Interesting. I think he doubled down. From what I saw, he went back on it. He did a apology and then he did another apology, pretty much saying like, I'm not apologizing for my opinion, I'm apologizing if it offended anybody, because my intention wasn't to offend anybody. But ultimately, like, we have to really be able to be unapologetic. And brother, everybody's just laughing because you went in. You went in. But so important, so important, so important, because yes, it starts with the family, right? Because we have to be constructive. Now, the spirit of Nana Amos Wilson, though, it really comes to spirit right now, because he has said about, how difficult it is in a lot of spaces when we're confined to time constraints, right? Because he says you could tell how serious someone is about liberating African people by the amount of time they give you to talk about the problem. And I think that's why it's important for us to have our own platforms and create our own media, because there's a lot here, right? We're an hour in and we're just getting in to it. And it's very important for us to be clear on what I like to call the opportunity. I don't like to put it in the context of a problem, because it is an opportunity. As the brother said, resistance breeds strength. So it's our opportunity to strengthen ourselves. It's our opportunity to heal above all. And I think that the way that a lot of the conversations are happening around the sexes is not with the intention of balance. Obviously, as you said, it's the emphasis on the battle and the dichotomy, right? The split, and not us seeing each other as a reflection of one another and seeing the necessity that we have to complement one another in balance, right? But that balance begins within ourselves. So I want to go there first and foremost, because in order for us to create healthy families, we have to be healthy people, which means we have a lot of healing to do, not only physically with our health, our nutrition, what we're eating, because even when we talk about the imbalance, a lot of that imbalance is coming from our biochemistry. There's a reality too, and that's why I don't like to outright dismiss people who are in a state of confusion sexually, because our biochemistry has been completely disrupted. We have so many synthetics, pesticides, herbicides, just so what else do they have? They have herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, all these chemicals, the hormones they're injecting into the meat. Even the vegetables that aren't organic are sprayed with all these chemicals. They literally, I remember Syngenta, a specific chemical company, that literally the science was showing in the experiments that they were doing that literally the amphibians they were testing the chemicals on were turning female. The male frogs were turning female. Now, this is not conspiracy theory. These are actual truths. So when we look at that reality and we're talking about the chemicals we're putting under our armpits, our endocrine disruptors, disrupting our reproductive system, our whole biochemistry getting thrown off whack, our hormonal system getting thrown off whack, all the xenoestrogens mimicking estrogens, no wonder there's effeminization, because testosterone is the masculine energy, essentially, in terms of our biology and looking at our biochemistry. So We have to look at that. The sperm count is down. There's ovarian cancer through the roof. Um, so many attacks on our reproductive system. So I don't outright dismiss the struggle that people are going through. Now, on top of that, we have the cultural, sociological indoctrination that's literally bullying people to accept the ideology, to normalize that. And I want to make a distinction between something being normal and something being regular. In order for us to determine what is normal, we have to stand at a particular vantage point. Normal for who? Normal in what context? Like I said, we have to stand in our circle. Let them sit in their square. Stand in our circle and recognize that we have a legacy. Sankofa, right? Going back to bring forward to the future what's going to take us to our liberation. And that means we have to be able to root ourselves in some of the moral principles that we've had, Ma'at being the primary one that we're lifting right now as our first pillar for revolution. Now, just because something becomes regular and it's happening all the time or happening consistently, which in some cases it's not, because it's also a power dynamic, because the narrative is being controlled. So even though there might be a minority operating within a certain paradigm sexually, that's constantly what's being put on the forefront. So that in itself is indoctrinating. So we have to be clear on how to define our own reality, right? That's how we stand in power. I think I had used that quote in the first session we did, because that was Huey P. Newton's quote for power. Power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. In order for us to formulate these narratives, in order for us to be clear, we have to have that knowledge of self, but we also have to communicate. We have to share. We have to have moments like this where we can actually speak the truth. And that is going to take courage, because these are unpopular expressions. And I say popular in the sense in the mainstream, because there's a lot of people who recognize and will always, the truth is always going to resonate, but may be afraid because of that witch hunt that happens if you say anything that's not politically correct currently. So I think when it comes to our family dynamics, and we're looking at a situation right now where we literally have men and women who do not want to be men and women, or do not want to be what they were born in their bodies. There's a very small, rare portion of people who are born with both sexual organs that are male and female. And even when we look back to ancient times, those people were seen as actually being special, like they had a special spiritual role and function within society. That wasn't something that was propagated up to then become the norm within society. So we have to look at that as a state of, or as, yeah, something that's in need of healing. So if you feel like you're in the wrong body, and you feel that spiritually your spirit is not in the correct body, then we have to address that cycle spiritually. We have to do the work to really process that. It's not about just having medical procedures and changing that. So I do think it's something that's very serious that we have to deal with, but we're in a state of chaos where it's do as thou wilt, right? And yes, everybody can do whatever they want to do, but to a certain extent, that's a slippery slope, because I'm seeing it happening even here in Cabo Verde, like with the children. It's like some people, it's like the culture is changing. It's like you see a child doing some wild shit, and it's like, I'm not even gonna say nothing because the parent's gonna get mad because I said something to the child. What happened to it takes a village? And that's the reality that we have to remember, especially in this age that we're in, the age of Hapi, Aquarius. This age is about balancing our personal and our collective responsibility. We're not islands. We're in an ecosystem. We're all connected. And as much as we've invested into individualism, it has not served us. We have to find a way to honor our individual reality and balance that with our collective responsibility, because the choices that we make as individuals affect us across the board. And that's one of the things that I think is very difficult for a lot of people to process, because when you start having this conversation about sexuality, it's very personal, it's very intimate, which is interesting because, as you said, there's so much sexploitation that sex is just put out there. And our sexuality is not anything to be ashamed of. And we're very sexual beings. And Black August is a very, like, when we talk about that Sekhmet energy, that lioness energy that this month, this moon cycle is all about, it's all about that energy of passion. It can be lust. But like you said, if they keep our energy center blocked at the bottom, because our sexual energy is in our second physical energy center. So when that energy gets stuck and it's imbalanced there, it can't flow up to our solar plexus, which is our ability to wield our will, to actually create and do what we need to do. On top of that, so it creates that laziness. And then it's not able to come up to our heart space to make sure we're in integrity. It's not able to go through our throat energy center so we can actually express ourselves, right? Decompress so we're not congested, we're not constipated with so much that we're not releasing. Especially when we look at the male, our male counterparts, our male complements, there's so much repression because of this fear of now being associated with being homosexual, because any sign of femininity is now seen as being gay, and then it's used in a derogatory way. We have to lean out of that, because again, we're coming back to balance. And like I said, it starts with the individual. We each have masculine and feminine energy. Our biochemistry is going to actually dictate what we express most, which is why I'm saying there's a reality that there's a state of imbalance. So we have to focus with balancing the body and the biochemistry, our nutrition. That's a primary piece. So we do a lot of work around food, land, because as Malcolm said, revolution is based on land. And if we don't have control of our food, they're going to keep feeding us this poison that's literally destroying us and creating chaos within our bodies. So we have to go to the root of these issues. And when we see that we both have masculine and feminine energy, as female, I'm going to strive to be in a position where I can operate predominantly in my feminine energy, but still I'm going to need my masculine energy to protect myself. I'm going to need my masculine energy to be disciplined, to, all the things that we associate with masculine and feminine. And I think that the problem is right now is people are misinterpreting the constructed ideas that really don't even matter, like what color you wear, like shit that's irrelevant, instead of the actual nature of how the positive and the negative charge function, right? The polarity, like taking it back to science. You have push and pull. You have a receptive energy and you have an active energy. And it's simply that. We both have both of those. It's the electromagnetism of this entire existence. So I just think that that's something that is important for people to put into context. Like, it's okay to have feminine traits. We all have feminine energy. If you repress that feminine energy, that's more dangerous than, because, now we have this, we also have like extreme, imbalance on both sides, because we have a huge imbalance with a lot of women, a lot of females operating in hyper masculine state as well. So I'm not trying to focus only on one side, but I'm wondering what comes up for you in terms of how that's being expressed. Oh, I think it's on mute. Okay. Go ahead.
We don't have a real system of how to raise our children. On the continent, I don't remember the name of the book, but I was reading about this particular African group, African ethnic group. It was two brothers. They were saved from a war within Africa between another African ethnic group. And they were adopted by these Christians. And the Christians, good people, they adopted these two orphaned black male youth. They took them to the grocery store and they bought them some cookies. The two little boys laughed and laughed and laughed and just looked at the cookie, and they gave the cookies back. And so their hosts, their adopted family, well, don't you want these cookies? They said, no, we don't. You don't give a boy that's going to be a man sweets. We don't eat these. That's taboo in our culture. And my mind was blown. I had never heard anything quite like that. So you see, wherever they came from, they were made into young men. There was nothing left to chance. They weren't sitting looking at TV for too long, which is a passive experience. And I want everybody to hear me on this one. When you're sitting in front of the television, you are being programmed. I don't care what program it is. All right.
That's
And I
not
would like,
TV. It could be YouTube, whatever.
when I say TV, I'm including
Yeah.
all of that. All
I'm
right.
letting you know, because some people are like,
Because
I don't watch TV no more.
what you need to do, especially parents with young children, you give them a hobby. I have taught rich white children who in some areas knew even more than I did about literature, European literature. And I asked them about how they knew certain things that they know. And many of them, they had no television at all. And I'm not talking about in the Stone Age, okay? After they had their dinner, after the maid made their dinner, they went out to the back and picked apples, peaches. They picked from the crop they had harvested. And then Neff would know this well. And then after you do work like that on your land, you're tired. You got to go shower and get ready for bed. Our children must be reared from some or much of the media that they are now glued to. That is not teaching them anything. And every movie that you see is the product of somebody else's mind. And when certain images from that movie seep into your mind, it's disturbing it. For example, I mentioned earlier that I looked at this movie over the weekend with some youngins. I'm trying to still get this image out of my mind where this boss man, he was white, told this black guy, if you really want to work here, it was at some stock exchange, you got to drink this deer cum. And all the other stockbrokers were, do it, do it, do it, do it. So I'm looking at a jar of effing deer cum. Like I said, I'm still trying to get this out of my system when I meditate. And I said to myself, I'm talking to the movie now. Don't do that. Well, of course, he took the deer cum. And where does come from? Where does come from? So let's go deeper with this. What really is that brother drinking? And of course, he took the jar and he drank it. And they, yay! Then he threw up on, everybody. So I'm like, again, this is Tuesday. I saw that movie, I think Saturday. Was it Saturday, Friday? Anyway, over the weekend. I'm fighting, literally, to get that image out of my mind. Okay, night and day when I meditate. But I was happy that I saw that because I know that young people are looking at movies like that, and they aren't going to try to eradicate it from their minds. Why should they? They will keep it there so that it could fester in the filth that it portrayed,
Yeah.
you see. And this was, the boss was a white guy. the drinker of the deer cum was a black guy. So that's even said a lot about race relation. And then the black guy later in the movie went to him and said he had lost some money on the stock exchange. You know, I'm so sorry. I know I let you down. I know I let you. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, would you look at the upside down dynamics that they are portraying here, where this black man, young black man, handsome black man, goes to this white guy and says, I'm sorry because I lost you money. I lost you money, and my ancestors, my people, been here for centuries and made you money. Let me stop myself. You
Yeah.
get my drift here.
Yeah.
The
I think.
media
Ooh,
is in too much of a control of our people. And we have to bring our people out of that magical maze, that haze, and really teach them about Earth is a planet. There is a morphogenetic field. I write about that in this book where I compare poetry of Huey and Bobby and other Panther leaders to ancestral memory. Because ancestral memory, of course, is in the morphogenetic field. Some people call the consciousness, world consciousness, or whatever. It has different names. But I think Neff would deal with it as the energies that are around, and we cannot see them, but they are there. So our kids, and even our adults, and even many of our elders, just because you're an elder don't mean that you got it all together. Trust me. You know, I mean, we have to come away from the artificiality that is this planet
mhm.
and get back to the holistic way of living. In the 1950s, early 1960s, if a girl got pregnant, that was a shame to the family. In fact, my mother got pregnant with my older sister. I think she was 14. Well, they had to get married. Both of the families came together and said, look, y'all getting married. Now, it didn't last that long, but nevertheless, my sister had her father's name. All right. My mother, for a time, had a nice husband. You know, they were kids, of course. But I'm just saying, you didn't just have a bunch of babies. Oh, heck to the no. In fact, in the 50s and 60s, if you got pregnant out of wedlock, they'd send you south to some southern relative, and then you might come back. Oh, Shirley just adopted. You listen, that was a shame on the black family. Now, all of those kinds of morals have broken down. It's not, to get pregnant, to meet a brother and have sex early on. No, you don't do that. Why should he, buy the cow if he can get the milk for free? I mean, really. And this culture has pushed a degeneracy that younger people have just fallen into and accepted. And it has not done us any good. With and I add to that the addition of keeping our true heroes away from us so that we don't even know they exist. I'm gonna give you one example. I give talks about the Black Panther Party all around the country, Darn near every time I give a talk on the Black Panther Party for self defense and my heroes, somebody in that audience is normally a girl, young lady. She'll come up to me, where can I join the Panthers? And somebody in school, somebody darn near ready for college. They think because they have such a lack of knowledge of recent history that the Panthers still exist. So what does that tell you? They are not learning their own history in these schools. And it even continues into college and universities. Trust me on that. So we have got to be more observant and participatory in our own Black population. We've got to, like what Garvey did, we've got to solidify our needs our desires, our wants as a community. This is what Huey and Bobby did. It's in the 10-point platform. What do our people need? And then we have to come up with strategic ways to put our people's needs into practice. Dig. There was no breakfast for school children before Huey and Bobby. It didn't exist. And Bobby Seale and Huey Newton certainly didn't have a lot of money. They had no money. All right, they were just working people. Well, Huey was kind of criminal, but Bobby was a working man. All right, okay, he had a family. How did they rent the first branch of the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California? Bobby Seale went home to his woman and he said, "Look, me and Huey are going to create the Black Panther Party." I know she probably just wanted to shoot him, but nevertheless, so he had to take some of his money from his job to rent the office. Now, later on, once it got going, they then realized that hungry children were going to school. How are you going to learn if you're hungry? Okay. They created the free breakfast for school children program. They did not ask a politician, "Will you please help me?" They did not write for a grant. They looked around at their own environment, recognizing that these grocery stores were making money off of Black people. So why shouldn't they give some of the foods that they take in to the people in the community? This is how the Black Panther Party's free breakfast for school children started. Then they found good people like me, many others, who said, "Yeah, we'll serve the kids. Yeah, we'll do it for free. Yeah, we'll get up at 5 in the morning so that we could get to the church on time. Yeah, we'll cook the food." Why? Because look, they knew that they loved Black people. So they knew that other Black people love Black people too, and they were correct. And I just want to emphasize this. They had no proof that there would be a success. None. They relied on their own courage, their own intelligence, and their own love for Black people, and their own sacrifice. Because when Bobby Seale decided to share his money with the needs of the Black Panther Party, his home life had to sacrifice. His wife, Artie, and their little baby, they had to sacrifice so that there could be a Panther office. So we have to, I always use them as an example because they were fascinating people, still are. Bobby's still with us, Huey's not. You have to look at your environment very deeply and very critically and very courageously and do what you think is best, not only for yourself. Okay, because what did feeding Black children do for either Huey or Bobby? What it did, it helped Black children. And I'm going to end with this one. Many of the parents who came to the church with their children, they were hungry too. They were hungry too. And we fed the parents and the children.
Well, what I really want to say to that is, one, they can't join the Black Panther Party, but they can join the Tehuti Ma'at militia.
That's
Because
right.
what we really need, because when you look at the selfish pursuit of profit and capital right now, is really driven people away from that deep love for the people and service. So we need members of the militia because we have to do that work on the ground. We have to, we modeled our organic food for the people platform or program based on the free breakfast program, but we had to look at where we needed to improve and revolve that system, because we can't just be feeding the children anything. We can't be feeding them the pesticides and the herbicides.
Right.
So everything is rooted on organic food, teaching the skills to actually have the space to grow and cultivate your own food. So no matter where you are, you can use the Tehuti Ma'at community garden model and either take an existing community garden and incorporate it into the Organic Food for the People network. Or if you're in Brooklyn, in New York City, you can actually be a part of Tehuti Ma'at Garden. And if you just have access to any land, a vacant lot, because we started with a dilapidated lot that we
Wow.
cleaned out. to show the model of how to do this. So it can be done, but again, it's about the service, right? Being able to have those spirits that are willing and able to do that, but also creating an economy around it as well, because that's another aspect that we revolved beyond the Panthers, was how we have to create these cooperatives, you know. And when I think about the blueprint for Black Power and looking
Oh,
at
yeah.
how we have more of a revolutionary economy within capitalism, the only way that we can do that is through cooperative business ventures. So that's what organic food for the people ultimately is. We have to have an independent sovereign food network, food system. So I wanted to say that I also, you know, the platform is there, the 11 pillars. If you go to tehutimaat.org/about, you can see the 11 pillars and what our revolutionary ideology is based on, and what our goals are, our missions, and our different cooperative ventures. And you can get involved, and you can join the Tehuti Ma'at militia by going to tehutimaat.org/join. Now, there's some comments and questions that I want us to get to, Mama Regina. But I also wanted to speak to what you were saying about the hazing in that film, because when I think about like the sororities and the fraternities and these Greek
Oh.
societies
Mhm.
in these intellectual gas chambers that we call institutions of education, I think it's very important for people to recognize that there's rituals that are being done in those spaces as well that are also very powerful and very dangerous to our psyche. So that's one of them. You know, like those spaces have a lot of that hazing, and like a lot of it is like sexual in nature for some reason, right? But then again, we're going back to the Greeks and the Romans, and it makes sense when you look at Greek and Roman culture. But when we're talking about the balance of the sexes, because I see Sister Nyasha says they're only blaming Black women, not men. We need to be honest. I want to know, first of all, I want to make sure I comprehend what you're saying, because we're not blaming anyone. So I don't know if you're interpreting what we're expressing properly. But yeah, we're not blaming anyone. Our whole thing is it's not about the battle of the sexes. So there is no blame game or pointing fingers. This is about the balance. The reality is there's fault in both sides of the spectrum. There's opportunities to strengthen both sides, and there's healing that's necessary on both sides. But I see you saying shaming Black women wasn't the solution. The 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s wasn't perfect. We need to be honest. No one's saying the 60s, 70s, and 80s was perfect. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Mama Regina, but she also
I
says
don't
there were.
really, I don't really understand what Mayasha is saying. I I haven't shamed anyone. I love Black people. I love Black men. I love Black women. I love Black children. So I'm not, sister girl. I want you to, just think a little differently about what you're hearing here, because there was no shame. I wouldn't even be with
Well, I
Neff
guess she's saying
if
that
she
in
was
the
shaming.
maybe she's saying in the 60s and 70s and 80s, which you
Well,
can
I was
speak
in
to.
the
I
60s and
can't speak to that.
70s
I
and
was born
80s,
in
and
1990.
I still can't. I don't understand the question. Let's go to somebody else that's more clear.
Okay. So we also have, okay, so Danny says independent filmmaking is revolutionary. Well, I want to say that revolutionary independent filmmaking is revolutionary, but not all independent filmmakers are creating revolutionary work. Just because it's independent doesn't innately make it revolutionary, but I think that's why
That's
we
right.
need, and I know Danny is a filmmaker, we need revolutionary films to be made. We need the
That's right.
countercurrent to the mainstream, because we're not going to get that from the establishment. We're not going to get that from these
Hmm.
megalithic corporations and
No,
companies
we're
that
not.
are the narratives that they're putting out.
Hmm.
I'm not even gonna go to Jabril was just throwing up at your story about that movie. He also said there ain't nothing sweet about those boys. They're
Hey,
not. Okay, so I want to make sure. Okay, so I want to go in order. So there's a question here about the two-spirited identity from the Native American tradition. People who identify as non-binary always bring that up as their defense.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think about the two-spirited identity? So what I'll say first, and then you can respond, Mama Regina, is the twin spirit, right? Gemini, Tehuti energy, is yes, absolutely a thing. But I think what is important for us to know is there in Ma'at is whole. So yes, we have polarities, we have components to the whole, right? The polarity that we're talking about that creates the dynamic of existence that we have right now, that we experience in everything. You have left and right, you have up, you have down, right? You have darkness and light. So that
That's right.
polarity exists in all things. And the two-spirited nature is saying that one person, one being is embodying both. And what I'm saying is I think that that is our nature. We all have, even in the Asian tradition, the Chinese have the yin and the yang, right, as an expression of Ma'at, or the Tao, the Tao. That is also an expression of Ma'at, because we have to recognize there is a legacy and direct connection to Kemet with the dynastic expressions in China in particular. So I think it's very important to recognize that I feel we all have that duality, that
That's right.
complementarity within us. That's what I was expressing. So yes, but I think it's also important. Remember, it's both and. We have to see the whole and also see the components that make up the whole. And that's the essence of honoring, right, our individual reality and our collective. Is literally the balance of both. So I feel that, I'm not saying, people can identify as non-binary. I mean, we have a lot of forces of nature that were expressed as being both male and female, androgynous, Ptah, which is actually the complement to Sekhmet, right? I talked about Sekhmet, the lioness energy. Like, that's the force that governs, like, the energy we're in right now is ruled by the sun. But the balance to that is Ptah, because she has to have her masculine counterpart. And Ptah was androgynous, as the force of creation was depicted as being androgynous, right? But in its expression, it was still a masculine energy, but it was never shown with an erection like many of the other masculine energies. But this is, again, to depict a certain nature, a certain expression. So yes, I do think that different individuals may embody different expressions, and maybe actually, like I said, there are people who are literally hermaphrodites, but that's not going to be the majority of the population. So we can't make rules and laws and, create a culture around the minority, or, a rare sector of the population. So I think that's where we have to be clear, because now we're dealing with a reality where a lot of these ideas are being put forward as the baseline. So now when you have young, impressionable minds that are now adopting these ideas as the norm, that's where I feel like we have to see the reality that we're in a degenerate cycle. So, like I said, we had a golden age, things go up, go down, and they come back around. We're really in that, you know, darkest hour, right? What we would call winter solstice, right? When the night is longer than the day. That's where we're at right now. We're in a degenerate cycle of humanity. There's a lot of suffering on the planet, and there's no denying that. There's clear disorder within the planet, and I don't know if anyone would really argue against that. But again, we have to see the other side, right? Especially as leaders, we have to have vision of that transformation process, that healing process. So that's what I have to say about the non-binary. But I don't know if you have anything to say about that based on the two-spirited identity from the Native
I
American
have
tradition.
studied with Native American shamans, and like Neff was talking about the masculine and the feminine. I mean, this is what brings people to the earth, and every animal, every insect gives birth to their kind. So, and the only way to replicate, to give birth, is when a man and a woman come together. So the gods or the netters and the Neterts can get together, the gods and goddesses in ancient Kemet. Every god had a complement. That's in the mythology. And Native American culture believes in family. Are you kidding me? They even had long houses. The long house Native American people, where the grandparents were all the way at the other end of the house and the new family was in the middle and the front of the house. Family meant everything to them, but they had a clear idea of what the man was supposed to do and what the woman was supposed to do. It was the warriors that went out to fight and to get the buffalo so that they would have food and clothing and housing. That was the warrior clan. Women had the children. They took care of the domiciles. It is in not only our nature, but it is in our body. Women have breasts not just for men to fondle, the breasts are for the babies to suckle. Women give birth, men can't give birth. So whoever sent us here had that design in mind. So men have their particular roles. I'm not saying it doesn't, sometimes meld with the female role. I'm not saying that. But there are certain things that make up a man, just like it's certain things that make up a woman. And if you come to this earth and you got a penis, you's a brother. You's a man. That's it. You got a penis, you a man. Now, you want to question God about, well, I don't feel like if you look down and you have to hold your junk to pee, you are a man. Now, if you come
Can
to the
I
earth and
can I
just,
introduce us to
you
an
have your
ancient Bible?
womb, you have your vagina, you want to question God about why do I have that's another story. But normally when the sexes come to this planet, if they are physically a certain way, okay, that spells masculinity. If they're physically a certain way, it spells femininity. And that's how you make
Which means that
families.
the dominant expression of the energy, right? Because everyone's still going to have the other side. And I think that
And
that's the part of the
you, you know
aspect,
what,
the
Steve, too? You know what,
spirit.
Steve, too? Um, and I'm not faulting anybody. Be what I really don't like about this movement is what Neff mentioned about what the castrating children. That are you? I don't even have words for that. But I do want to say this because I didn't notice it at the time, but I've thought about it since then. When I was a much younger woman, right? Not even in the well, no, I had been in the party when I was. Well, I've never really left the party. I still feel like I'm a Panther, but nevertheless, when strong women, lesbian women, because they told me straight out, they were attracted to me, and I don't mean sexually either. They were attracted to me. We did business together because I was strong, like they were. So sometimes a strong woman can just see that element of herself as not being a woman.
Yeah.
But see, you could be a strong woman and be a woman. I will kick your ass if you fuck with me. All right? I will. But I'm still a woman. I mean, I don't see
I
myself as
think
being. I have had to take a gun, and Brother Love almost lost his life because he broke into my house because I didn't want to date his ass anymore. But I shot around him. The point is this: I and other women, we recognize. I know I'm strong. I mean, hey, I ain't going to go into the stories. I'm a strong black woman, but I'm a woman. I mean, whoever sent me here, God sent me here, the universe sent me here. I am not conflicted. I love being a woman, but I will. Hey, I got some traits that you would definitely call. Well, she's really a man. I mean,
yeah.
yes.
There's there's an aspect of that I really want to speak to, because even earlier when I was speaking in the spoken word piece that I shared, and I talked about the emasculation of the men, the rape in the prisons, and how the men, I think this came up in the last session that we did, how our men were the buck breaking, how the men were actually would take the biggest, strongest man and rape him. Because usually we do talk about the women being raped, but not necessarily talking about the men being raped, and how that was suppressed on a completely different level, because we're also talking about homosexuality there as well, and the power dynamic that's there. But when we look at the fact that the Black men, and I'm talking about collectively, and I'm also talking symbolically and literally, have been castrated, have been emasculated in front of us, that expression of masculinity in Black women is the balance to that, because there has to, that masculine energy has to be present. What do we say when we talk about men? To protect and provide, like in your traditional, like stereotypical looking at what the role of the male is and the female. Because the male is biologically stronger, right, and all the other aspects, the woman is more intuitive, more you know fragile in many ways physically.
Yes.
The reality to that is the part that then brings that social dynamic to it. But that social dynamic isn't inherent within it. We have to adapt, because we have literally had to survive. We've been on
That's right.
survival mode, and we're coming out of
That's
that.
right.
So because we've had to survive, we have to, the healing is us getting out of survival mode and moving into self-preservation. Means now, yes, I have to move into my masculine when that's necessary, but I also have to see when that's not serving me, because we have to honor the fact that we want to move closer within our nature. But if we're not in a situation where we're actually safe to operate within our feminine, or vice versa for the
That's
men,
right. That's right.
then that's the dynamic where we have men that don't want to be men because of how dangerous it is to be a man. And I do want you to speak on that, Mama Regina, because that's very significant. That expression of, or the continuation of trauma, because now we know with all the science that trauma is passed genetically through our blood. And also, I remember in the book by Dr. Joy DeGruy, um, post-traumatic slave syndrome, and she talks about how many different patterns that existed during enslavement, how we continue them within our culture today,
That's right. We do.
in the way that children are raised, and how we have to undo a lot of that. And in terms of us balancing the sexes, like Ma'at, balance is going to happen either way, right? So even within the imbalance that we're experiencing, it's still balancing itself out, because you still have to have both polarities. Now, it might be women embodying more of that masculine energy, but in order for us to balance that, both sides of the scale have to be adjusted, because we're trying to come back into equilibrium. That's the point. We're not trying to be in a balancing act. Ma'at is about the center, right? The equilibrium itself. So I think that part is also important, because we're talking about, like, yes, obviously there's so many factors. It's a very nuanced conversation, and it's not about being anti or against anything. We have to be able to analyze critically the reality of our social environment and put it into the context for us as Black African people, the war that we've been in for the past, 600 years, and put it into that context.
Well,
So
it's
yeah.
very dangerous, and Black men feel this. They feel it now. First of all, energy doesn't die, it just transforms. So the energy of all of those Black men that were raped and lynched, understand that these bastards would let the Black man dead, burnt alive, swing from a tree for days. So Black children actually saw this. Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, part of his childhood, he walked by and saw a man that he was intimate with, I mean friendly, all right, with, swinging from a tree. What the hell does that do to the psyche of the Black child, of the Black male child, although women were lynched as well, but not on the scale the black men were. And that's just a historical fact. Now, the purpose of the black man in Africa was to protect the woman. Just about all of the African cultures, that is a factor. In fact, when the families decide that their children are going to marry, right? That man, he's from another clan. He comes to the woman's clan on the continent in the ancient of days, not even so ancient of days, and he lives in her family compound. So you know that keeps up. Let's say he's a little crazy. Well, he ain't gonna be crazy. Her father's down the street, or across the next compound. He's not. I mean, he's just not. So there were attributes that a man had and a woman had. Now, you get to America, and even before you get to America, because on the slave ship, they would stop in the Caribbean and they would, in fact, take some of the men and they would rape them right in front of the women. Now, the men are manacled, I'm putting my hands behind my back, and they are shackled, okay, they're at their ankles. So what can they do? If you are roped up and chained up like that, you can't do anything but accept the horror that is happening to you. Now, the sister who's fresh from Africa, all she has ever known is that the man, her father, brother, whatever, they protect the women. She's in this vast new world where she don't even speak the language, don't understand it, and she sees this happen to the man. How protected can she feel? And on the other side of that, how does that man now react to being so violated like that in front of all of these people? Then you get to America, and if you speak or look the wrong way, you will be beat in front of your whole group. If you haven't seen 12 Years as a Slave, please see it. Please see it. Read the book is even better, but go ahead and see the movie. So he had no way to protect her. Are you kidding? The black man couldn't even protect himself. All of that terror is still in us. It is still in brothers right now who can be shot down, even if they're a child, like Tamir Rice, okay? Who could hunt down. Oh, don't let me get started, because I was going to list all of these brothers that have been shot, but you get the drift. And all of the police just about got off.
I think the
How
other
strong can a black man feel when he sees this?
Yeah, I also want to say that police murder is the tip of the iceberg. When we're talking about really going under the water, what about all the people who are not killed? The ones who are taken into custody, who are shackled, who are put in the hole, and who don't have anyone to check on them and
That's
become
right.
prey within the prison industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's very significant too, because there's a rampant rape culture in the prison system.
Yeah.
And when we see how that's also translated into the culture that's given to us, the
Mm-hmm.
falsification of African
Mm-hmm.
consciousness
Mm-hmm.
that's given to us as Black culture through music right now, because our music has been co-opted. There has been a coup
Yes.
d'etat.
Yeah.
They took over, and the shit that they're putting out on the waves, on the radio waves, is poison. It's garbage, and it's reinforcing that to the point where it's literally creating a continuum of that trauma and that rape. And trying to normalize that on top of that,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
you either have the deep suppression of it, or you have the other opposite end of the spectrum, and then you have everything in between happening. But healing is what we don't have, because
Right.
that pain that's there is not being felt, it's not being addressed, there's no space for it. And even when you spoke earlier and you spoke about us being capital, right? Being traded. We have to see that when we bring up enslavement and our ancestors being enslaved, it's very important for us to recognize how that is still happening right
Exactly.
now through the systemic construct itself. Remember that African people were first capital. And remember that our brothers and sisters that are in jail, when they put that bond on them, they are trading those bonds. It's a market, stocks and bonds. There is no money within this system. All there are negotiable instruments. And those stocks and bonds are what keep this system going. It's what's fueling the capitalist system, right? They're
That's right.
creating they're creating
Hmm.
something out of nothing.
That's
But
right.
what is it? It's not out of nothing. Let me correct that, because they're basing it on human life. It's still the same system. That bond that's being traded represents a body that is in prison, a human that's in prison. There is no value for humanity within the system that's constructed. So it's high time that we start divesting from it and stop making excuses to integrate into it. Because we've been successfully domesticated does not mean that we have to continue this. And a lot of us don't have the courage to have the vision to see ourselves free, or to trust those who do have the vision and to make the sacrifices necessary to create that freedom.
Hmm.
And that's where we differ from where we were before in the movement. We
That's
need
right.
that heart, and that sexual energy is key, because the pornography, the masturbation, and this constant sexual stimulation, that's the life force. When we have men and women that are constantly in that space, how are we going to put our energy towards it? How are we going to put our passion towards changing the reality of the situation that we're in when we're numbing ourselves constantly? When we're reiterating and embracing the trauma that has continued through sexuality. When you think about BDSM and getting choked, and the music itself is literally programming people into eating ass and all kinds of things. Think about how the music and what you're hearing influences your sexual desires. That's very real. It's very real how it influences us. Now, that doesn't mean we're sexual beings. I'm not saying we have to be prudes, we need to be celibate, but we have to see the sanctity and the sacredness of sex. And we have to see how it's being weaponized to stifle our energy. And that's key, because there's a big movement right now, the no fat movement, where brothers are retaining their semen, and they're
What?
seeing
What?
how it
What? What?
affects
What?
their energy.
What?
They're doing semen retention. Basically, they're not going to ejaculate, and they're seeing how it literally is giving them more energy. It's part of
Oh.
this, like, holistic, like, I'm noticing this a lot of brothers who are in like the fitness community, and or even like the spiritual community. So it's like, contain that discipline again to
Yeah.
be able
Yeah.
to contain
Sportsmen
and
do that.
control
Yeah,
your
too.
sexual
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because when it's all
Okay.
about sex, it doesn't matter as long as there's a whole, like, you know it is what it that's real literally how people are functioning right now. It's just sex. I'm freaky. So it's like, I don't know, this is different. different there's different levels. But again, if you're only looking at it from your own perspective, and it's just self-centered, and you're not taking into consideration the context that you're in, the continuum you're in, the lineage, literally the ecological ramifications of the choices that we make, all of that has to be taken into consideration if we actually want to move into a healed reality. But if we stay in this rat race, as they call it, it's just nothing but death and destruction. That's literally what it is. We're talking about a rampant expansion in sexually transmitted diseases right now. I
Yes.
know there was an outbreak of syphilis
Hmm.
in several different predominantly Black neighborhoods or cities in particular. I think Houston was one of the most recent ones that I saw about or read about, but watched the news report about. But yeah, they're not talking about that. They're not going to talk about that. It's all going to be about pleasure, but they're not going to deal with the pain. And remember, Ma'at is about balance. So if we want to balance the sexes, we have to balance everything. We have to balance the emotional reality. There's always a polarity. So if you want to have pleasure, there's going to be pain on the opposite side of that, especially when it's not in the center. When you're dealing with extremes, they are polarities. So there's this emphasis on just self pleasure and doing what feels good and do whatever you want without thinking about the responsibility and the ramifications of the choices that you're making. And we're living that reality right now. We're living that reality from previous generations. And that's what we have to now be accountable to and accountable for, is the choices that we're making have, cause and effect. So whatever we're going to reap what we sow. So we need to start sowing different seeds. We got a lot of weeding to do first.
And check this out. Check this out, Nev. California just lowered the penalty for adults having sex with children.
That's really interesting. And I think that that's an important thing for us to talk about, because when it comes to, because I was actually watching this video the other day about the history of pedophilia within Roman culture, and how, that's where the origin of mentors come from, right? Like working with the younger boys would literally have sexual relations with the older men. And that was just part of the culture. Now, when we look at the reality now and what's being used on the platform of LGBTQ plus, there's that whole platform is really being pushed by this other movement that's looking to, they took homosexuality out of the diagnostic and statistical manual in psychiatry so that it's not considered a mental disorder. And now they're trying to remove pedophilia from there.
That's right.
And the language changes, because I saw a question that Brother Jabril had about how we feel about pronouns. Like all of that, when they're trying to change the language, they're trying to redefine things on you. They're trying to impose ideas on us as a society. We have to be very wary of that. We have to be on alert about that, because we need to stop playing about our children.
That's right.
We really need to stop playing about our children, because when they start talking about reducing the age of consent, and they wanted to make a sexual preference to want to have sex with children, that's a non-negotiable. Like, yes. We really have to get to the point where it's like, it was been past, enough was enough. We passed enough. So at this point, I feel that there's a fire in the collective spirit that's like, all right, cut it out. And it's going to be a battle. It's literally a culture war right now. So I'm going to just add this other question here, or comment. Speak truth always. Truth breeds trust. Trust breeds unity. No one unifies with those they do not trust. No one trusts those that do not speak truth. Speak truth always. Ashe. I mean, and that's really what Ma'at is. So it has to be embodied. That's the thing, because we're also talking about honesty and integrity, right? Because Ma'at is also sobriety and propriety, morality. So you have to use, I always say you got to use 10,000 English words for one African concept, because it's that deep. But it's not just a concept. This is a force of nature that we have to be at a higher frequency in order to embody that energy, right? We have to raise our standard of integrity. We have to raise our standard of living and being. We have to make sacrifices to be in Ma'at. We have to make sacrifices to be in Ma'at. Yeah. You're going to have to get uncomfortable, because the convenient things are the things that are killing us.
Yeah, very good.
So we also, so that was to you, Mama. And then Nyasha, are you talking about martial law? I'm not sure what portion you're speaking of. I don't think I was speaking about martial law. At some point, were you speaking about anything that was in relation to martial law?
Never.
Okay. But if you want to clarify that, you can. I don't know if you have any final thoughts or certain aspect of the conversation that you want, that we haven't touched on, that you want to make sure that we express in the context of
No,
Ma'at?
I think we've touched on a great deal. I honestly do. I haven't heard a lot of conversations like this, and when I do look at YouTube, I look for serious things, okay, and I look at what some Black YouTubers are saying, and especially not saying. You know, that's what has gotten to me over the last, especially over the last 10, more than the last 10 years. So the conversation that we've had, I think, is exceedingly important because I haven't heard enough of these kinds of conversations. I do not want to hurt anyone's feelings. I really don't, especially Black people, because we've been through so much hell. I don't want to hurt anyone. And if my words, if my perspectives have hurt you, do think about them though. Do think, because I just want you to think. Because if you feel that you should change your body or the body of your child, what are you saying about God? Do you believe in God? See, I just want you to go deep because atheism began in Europe. There's no atheists in Africa. Now, it might be some now who have taken on a whole new culture, but you name the African group, they believe in something. They do not just believe that this experience on earth, okay, is something that should be adjusted to the point that you literally cut up your body, okay, to conform to what you think. Some thoughts are not from God. Or I'll put it like this, if you're atheist. Some thoughts are just not good, okay? You know, when you want to murder your father for good reason, maybe, that's not a good thought. It's a thought. You just dismiss that, okay? But
Yeah.
to deform your body takes individualism to a point we really don't need to go to as people on this planet. To
I
deny
think
the truth of who you are, Lord have mercy.
there's a
Okay,
lot
you
of
didn't make
slippery
yourself.
slopes.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Neff, I didn't understand you.
I was just saying there's a lot of slippery slopes that we've been entertaining for some time, and
Yes.
we're not being we don't become aware of it until it's like it gets to a certain point, and it's like, okay, now we got to put out a forest fire
Yeah,
when it was
instead
just
of
a
just a
little,
singular
you
thought.
know, it was just a
That's
little
why
flame, little
an
spark.
episode like this is important.
Yeah, because I
Whether
was
we
thinking
catch
about,
flack or not, it's important. It needed to be said.
yeah, I just, because when I think about the actual like surgery and changing your body, to me, fundamentally, it's not even about sexuality. I mean, even when I think about, just having unnecessary medical procedures like plastic surgery, changing your nose, changing your, adding breasts, getting the Brazilian butt lifts and all these things, and risking your life
That's
going
right.
under the knife when there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying from breast cancer and from other diseases,
Yes.
or just,
But
disorders.
the medical industry is having a wonderful time getting
Right, it's a
richer
huge
and
industry,
richer
but
and
we
richer.
allowed it. And what I was saying, what I wanted to make the point of with the slippery slope is we started making all of that okay within the culture. So now it's like, okay, if you can nip tuck this and that, then it should be no different to nip tuck that. And now it's to the point where we're so disconnected from nature and what the point is of this journey, which is to love yourself as
Yes.
you are. That's the journey. And yes, it's painful. So I can't say in on it in my I can't say in truth that I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, because I'm gonna be honest with you, as a healer, as a high priestess of Kemetic science, with the pure intention, a revolutionary spirit, a spiritual warrior, with the intention and primary goal, first and foremost, for revolution being healing. I know healing is pain. And I've gone through a lot of pain to stand where I stand today and be who I am, you're going to have to feel that pain. So it may hurt you, and that's okay. Pain is an emotion we have to learn how to feel. We've become too desensitized. We're numbing ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to see. That's the problem. That's why we don't want to face the reality of this degeneracy that we're experiencing on the planet as humanity, because we're numbing ourselves constantly with the stimulants, the coffees and the drugs and all of the different things. Now even the mushrooms are being abused and the plant medicine is being abused, and it's to the point where it's like there's just constant escape. And it's no, we have to sit in Ma'at. We have to sit in the truth of what is happening, and we have to be accountable to the choices that we make and the contribution that we make to this reality, because we can't, and that's the only way we can change it. Actually, that's the only way. So all this work and all this effort that's done to make you feel like you're unworthy, to make you feel like your existence doesn't matter, to make you feel like you need artificial intelligence and they're going to take your jobs. I'm telling you, there's many slippery slopes, and we keep investing into these lies. And I'm telling you, nature is the winning team. If you don't want to be on the winning team, cool. But just know, when there ain't no electricity on the grid, I want to see how that AI is going to work. When you ain't got no Wi-Fi, or when you can't get no coltan from the Congo, and you can't update your devices and they stop working on you. I want to see how that works. Do you know how to sow a seed? Do you know how you're going to feed your family? Do you know how to protect yourself? We have to get into reality, the real world. Yeah, I know it's mundane. There's no emojis and sparkles and glitter, but get real comfortable in that reality and in that mirror, and look at yourself in truth and see yourself. Take off the makeup and just embrace the truth. That's what Ma'at is. That's why our first pillar is Ma'at, because we embrace and we acknowledge that there's balance and order in the cosmos, and we have to embody that. And it's time to bring that reality, what they want to call the new kingdom, bring it right here. The divinity that you are, that they don't want you to see. You have to see it. That's your job. That's why you came here. Nobody's going to do it for you. So if Neff says something that hurts your feelings, okay. And let's move through that emotion. Right? Because everything that we feel is not always true. You know, we feel a lot of things. We have to be able to be mature enough emotionally to process our emotions, to not suppress them, to not be reactionary, to not be stifled into one. Like, I always give this example of my brother. My brother swears he's not emotional. He's not sensitive, excuse me. But he's constantly reacting emotionally. He's always angry. I'm like, does he not think anger is an emotion? Just because his limitation is that's the only expression of emotion that has been deemed appropriate for him to express. To the point where he doesn't even think that anger is sensitivity or emotional. And he has no other way to channel that energy. So there's a lot of work we have to do. And that's what this is about. So me and Mama Regina are going to be here every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And we hope that you come and you can join us live and you can engage in the chat and you can ask your questions. And yeah, we'll be here. Sister said, you're so right. We need to protect our children. Yeah, remember, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than you. We have to think about future generations. We have to start thinking thousands of generations ahead. There's one thing that I didn't touch on yet in this episode that actually I have to say before we close out. But I do want to acknowledge these comments. This was powerful. Keep doing these bills. African elder revolutionary mother and a younger African revolutionary sister. This will stand the test of time. Abibi Fahudie. Abibi Fahudie, Brother Jabril, and Brother Wale says nature agreed. Ashe. So there was a point you made earlier about the strength of Black women. And I have to say this in terms of the balance of the sexes because it's very, very important. Now, each each pillar of Tehuti Ma'at has two ancestors that rise as pillars of that particular pillar, right? So this pillar is Ma'at, and the two ancestors that are on our board of ancestors that hold up and lift the pillar of Ma'at for us are Hatshepsut and Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. Now, obviously, Ma'at is a principle that comes from Kemet. So Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen is one of our foremost scholars, one of the founding members of ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, still functioning to this day. Warrior, elder. If you are not familiar with Dr. Ben, you absolutely need to watch his lectures on YouTube. Dr. Ben spoke the truth. If there was a Ma'at, Dr. Ben was unapologetic.
Oh.
What he had to say, but I mean,
Yes.
he was taking even the elders that we have that are alive right now that are doing the trips to Kemet, like Kemet Nu, which is Baba Ashra Kwesi and his wife Mariwa. Mariwa, they bring people back to Kemet. He was a student of Dr. Ben. There are many people continuing the legacy of Dr. Ben. Now, he was a chematologist, right? They call it Egyptologist, which is interesting that our legacy literally has a specific branch of science dedicated to studying it. I don't know any other geographical region that has that, to be honest with you. If there is one, let me know. That's how deep it was. Now, Hatshepsut is one of our ancient ancestors in Kemet that everyone needs to know about this legacy. Now, particularly because she was an expression of a powerful warrior king. Okay, and I use that word loosely because we would really have to use our ancient word, which is Nesubiti, what they call the pharaoh. But that position was a position that was traditionally held by men. And this is why I said we have to be adaptive, because it's not that cut and dry, right? It depends on the situation. Hatshepsut held office, and she was not the first queen king, right? She was not the first female Nesubiti, but she was like literally, she was literally shown with the garb of the king, literally even the beard, which, you know, everything has its symbolism. But what I noticed is what they're trying to do, because I seen it at the Brooklyn Museum and it was a whole big fight because they put on there that there was transgender in Kemet, and they used Hatshepsut to show that. And the reason why I bring this up is because Hatshepsut didn't change her gender. It was clear that she was a woman. On the statues that you see in the museums, she has her breasts. It was shown because there was reverence for the masculine, for the male, and the fact that that role was for the male position. Because we had a balance in the way that the whole governing structure in ancient Kemet was not dominated by men or women. The way that the balance was shown, I think we talked about this in the last episode, the Nesubiti would be a male in most cases, but he would always be seen on his crown representing the two divine feminine principles, which can be easily boiled down to his mother and his wife, right? Showing that the man, the ruler of the land, is only the leader of the land is only as powerful as his wife and his mother, and that his authority comes from them. Because even the principle of the divine feminine, Ast, which is what I was saying before, Septet, right? The Sirius star system that's rising right now, along with Asar's belt, right? Because this is the couple, the divine couple that was shown rising on the eastern horizon. Now, all of our mythologies are based on the stars. And the thing about myth is the difference between a myth and a story is a myth is always happening over and over again. A story happens once, it's linear. So we're constantly embodying these energies and living out these mythologies. That's why even when you look at the mythology, there's so many different interpretations of the story. Sometimes they say when Aust put together his henenum, which you said penis earlier, and I was like, can I just give us another word? Because penis sounds so weak. Baba Heru always says this. He's like, listen to the vibration of the word penis. Say penis, penis. And then say henenum. Henenum. Like it just has like that depth to it, and like it just feels strong, right? So I like to bring us back to our ancient language, right? We don't need to, we can try to decolonize our tongues as much as we can. So when they say Ast fashions and makes his henenum in the myth, sometimes they say it was out of stone, sometimes it was out of wood, sometimes she fashioned it out of clay. That's because this story happened many, many times. It wasn't like one person. It was just that this is an energy that is embodied many times. It's cyclical. So we're here in these bodies, but we can embody these energies. These principles are here. The principle of Ma'at is here to serve as a guide, as a moral compass, right? The principles of Ma'at, there are 42 covenants of Ma'at. So before you had a 10 commandments, again, Dr. Ben wrote the book, The African Origins of the Major Western Religions. So we can see where they got the 10 commandments from. The books of Moses, right? When we look at Thutmose, we see how they villainize Kemet in Judaism. Yeah, we have to defend our legacy too. The same way they defend their legacy. And we had so many warrior scholars that did the work. They went to war in the academic institutions so that we could have our story and know that it's the truth beyond the shadow of a doubt. So we ain't arguing if Egypt was black. Last I checked, it's in Africa. That's all I'm gonna say. And last I checked, the people indigenous to Africa are carbon compounding people who happen to have what we call melanin, right? Darker skin complexion, can process certain photons from the sun that other groups of the human family cannot. Now, that's just the reality. If people are offended by that truth and that reality, did I lie? We have to look at that. That's the richness of our legacy. If other people can defend their legacy, then we have to defend our legacy. So it's very important to look back to the temple walls. They got the 10 commandments. We have the 42 covenants of Ma'at. They tell us the story of Moses. Moses was raised in the temples and he was raised as a prince of Kemet. Then he knew the 42 covenants of Ma'at when he got those 10 commandments. Did he not? Right? But the difference is those 42 covenants that are carved into stone to this day, those 42 covenants are actually declarations. So you would say, you do a moral inventory on yourself. That moral inventory you do on yourself is, I will not cause the shedding of tears. I will not sow seeds of regret. I will not waste water. And then at the end of the day, we would say, I have not caused the shedding of tears. I have not sown seeds of regret. I have not wasted water. But if we get to something that we have done, it is now our job to serouj ma'at, to restore ma'at. You have to be accountable. You have to do that inventory on yourself. This is the legacy that Kemet, that Africa was built on. And remember that Kemet was the peak. We're talking about the golden age. So what about all that it took, all of African history, of our story that it took to rise to that point? That was the peak. So that means that was also our decline. That was also our decline. So we have to look at the reality that this legacy was a continuation of what Africans had already been doing for millennia. Honoring nature, observing the cycles and the systems, aligning with it, being in sync with nature, right? But that was just an expression of our golden age, right? We have the Kushite empires. We have so many different empires. And we have the tradition in the Dogon are still, they honor the star, Septet, Sirius, to this day. The same star system, the same traditions, the mask rituals that they did. And I touched on all of this in the Sekhmet portal, the Lionsgate portal video that's on the channel. So I highly recommend that you watch that. It says significant ancient African cosmology. It's very, or astrology, I think it might say, but it's very important to know the roots of our culture and our legacy and be clear on how dynamic it is and how we can use it practically and apply it to our lives so that we can shift the reality that we're in, because we have to free our spirits. So when I said about the 42 covenants, right, that was a moral inventory we did. We didn't need police for millennia. Think about how long, how many dynasties in Kemet, 3 millennia. The divided states government has only been in position, that illegal settler colony that exists known as America. It only existed for a couple hundred years. So we have to keep in mind we have a very rich legacy. There's a lot there. We cannot be afraid of it. We have to embrace it. And our culture is literally going to be our weapon, because if we don't root ourselves in something, we're going to be blown off into the wind with these waves of exploitation and indoctrination and confusion. So that being said, I think we lost Mama Regina at the last leg. And yes, all praises due. Rise in power to our great ancestor, Dr. Ben, our great ancestor, Hatshepsut, and their legacy. I want to thank everybody who's been with us here live, especially those of you who have been engaging with us in the chat. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for contributing to the discussion and the conversation, sharing your questions. We'll be back here next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So please tune in for that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, you can actually hit the notification bell and you'll be notified whenever we go live. Tomorrow we have our Navigating Eternity series, where we talk about the ancient astrology and how it practically applies to us. Looking at the African origins of the Greek zodiac and how we can look at these things holistically and, most importantly, practically, and apply it to your life. So that's every other Wednesday. We'll be live tomorrow. And we're also going to have our detox panel coming up as well. This is going to be Detox Burn Your Bra Barbie. We're going to be talking about the implications of white deities on Black people. So I hope you can stay tuned for that, and I hope to see you there. All right. Power.